Hello and welcome. This is Pepin from Pepin Reacts. And today, here, we have another, not reaction, but discussion of Breaking Bad Season 1, Episode 3. What happened? Well, we had a reaction, but my hard drive got messed up and destroyed those reactions, so they no longer exist. Now, currently, we're up to Season 3, Episode 1 of the series. I haven't seen the series all the way through. Meader has. But this discussion is going to be a spoiler-free based discussion. So if you haven't seen the show, hopefully we don't spoil anything. You can just watch this with us, and it'll be great. We felt it important to kind of include the discussions with this because we want the completeness here. Because you get our opinions after like the season 1, episode 6, you're gonna be like, oh, okay, we don't have context. So this is gonna give you context. And also, there's just so much that happens in these early episodes that I think are very important to discuss. This here is my best friend, Meader. Meader, how you doing?
I'm here too.
That's his catchphrase, by the way. If you don't remember that, it's okay, because I forgot it once before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm good. Season 1, episode 3. You ready to start talking about it?
Yep. Now, we're pulling from breakingbad.fandom.com as inspiration. We're just going to go through each act, essentially, and give mild discussion, interjecting where it's important. So let's get into this.
It opens on Walt and Jesse cleaning up Emilio, who's like all over the floor. And while this is happening, there's also flashbacks of Walt back in his days as a graduate student. And he's talking with a female lab partner after analyzing the human body's chemical composition. They discover that it's only 99% of the body's makeup chemically is accounted for. So Walt muses that there has to be more to a human being than that. And then back in the present, Walt flushes a bucket full of a human body down the toilet. And this is, they kind of skip this here, but the female lab partner says like, well, what about the soul? And Walt kind of laughs like, obviously that's absurd, and then like looks at her, and then she's like gives a very serious look like she's not joking, and then he's like, yeah, maybe. So there's definitely, and I know we talked about there being some sexual tension here as well.
Yeah, and this is Walt when he was much younger, it looked like, and the lady also seemed a bit younger too, but to me there's definitely some sexual tension there, and it's kind of describing a couple things. Like, number one, Walt has this kind of materialistic viewpoint, which I think is ultimately correct, but he's kind of taking the soul out of things. And, it's like everything is just chemistry. And in a way, we're kind of seeing the result of that. Everything is just chemistry. Literally just this person is now contained in a bucket as like a globbity gloop.
But at the same time, there's the 1% of him that's missing. That's not a person that he's cleaning up. You know what I mean? And I think that's kind of like the mirror there. And on top of that, they're talking about chemistry the whole time. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, you have this sexual tension you have this literal chemistry between these two characters.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think a point I made during the scene was that Walt seemed far different, because this is like, we started the aggressive Walt, but this is like the aspiring Walt. Like the Walt that kind of takes the life by the balls and just kind of squeezes slightly. Like he is just all about this, and he's so into what he's doing. It's really interesting to watch. And the claim I made here with this episode was that this is the original Walt. This is Walt without the bullshit. Like, this is how he would want to be in this moment, talking about chemistry, making awesome thoughts and ideas, and having some awesome intellectual discussion with some other person, one of his peers.
Yeah, I think that's really, really adept. So he flushes bucketfuls of Emilio down the toilet, and then we flash to back at Walt's house, and Skylar and Walt's son Junior are painting the baby room. Skylar's sister Marie is kind of just watching. And Skylar's like really pregnant and up on a ladder, and Marie's like, shouldn't Walt be doing that? And she's like, yeah, you want to help? And she's like, no, I'm good. And I always find that very funny. Junior's cell phone rings. It's Lewis, of course, the introduction of Lewis. Who can forget? And he leaves, and then Skylar mentions that, somebody's been smoking marijuana. She tells Marie that she's writing a story about a stoner character and asks her about pot, and Marie assumes that means Walt Jr.'s smoking pot. Skylar insists it's just for a fictional character, but Marie's not buying it. She gets what's going on here, but she comes to the wrong conclusion. Then we're back at Jesse's house, and Jesse kind of sneaks into the bathroom, and he's smoking some meth to kind of deal with all of the shit that he's going through. Meanwhile, in the basement, Crazy 8, who's still shackled around the neck, scares Walt by addressing him by his real name and revealing personal details that Jesse had told him previously. And Walt gets really mad and confronts Jesse, who's high, doesn't let him in the bathroom. Walt kicks the door down. They fight over the meth, and then Walt chucks it out the window. And then they're chasing each other, trying to get to the meth first. And Walt kind of has a coughing attack while he's going down the stairs and barely recovers in time to catch Jesse before Jesse drives off in his car. And Jesse's like, Jesse's like, deal with your shit. Walt's like, there's more shit we gotta do. He's like, yeah, there is. There's more shit you gotta do. Deal with the basement, and drives off. And this is another, because this episode very heavily features another of our favorite recurring characters, and that's the toilet.
Yep. I mean, Toilet is a boss. It's maybe my favorite character, if not second favorite. It's a little hard to judge, but it gets a lot of screen time, and I love it.
Yeah, I definitely, I'm interested to see where they take the character moving forward. But so far, definitely one of the highlights. Get that guy an Emmy or whatever. Then Marie calls Hank, and Hank's like in the middle of a drug bust. She convinces Hank that Junior's smoking pot, and Hank needs to scare him straight. Hank originally is like, no, it's kind of Walt's job, isn't it? And Marie's like, yeah, but Walt's a pussy. And Hank's like, yeah, good point. So Hank takes Junior to, quote, the Crystal Palace, which is this local roach motel that meth heads and prostitutes hang out at. And Hank warns Junior that pot is a gateway to heavy drugs and tries to prove his point by calling over a disheveled prostitute named Wendy, who and shows Junior how meth has corroded her teeth. Disgusted, Hank threatens to bust Wendy if he sees her working there again, and Wendy kind of stumbles off, goes into a hotel room where we see she's actually she's actually there with Jesse, and they just start having sex. That whole scene is wild. Where she's like, hey, I'm not sleeping with a kid.
There's something I want to cover there with Marie, because we get the introduction to Marie, and Marie's definitely like a very interesting character. She's definitely someone like you might see in real life, right? You know,
Yeah.
Pretty selfish and getting involved in things that she should not be involved in, right? I mean, or she took it upon herself to imply what was being understood there, and like, oh, well, Junior, and then she gets Hank to essentially, go out and be a dad to Walt Jr.
Yeah.
And, Hank says, I think up to this point, Hank has been like a kind of an asshole. And he still is an asshole here in this scene, but it's like he kind of like won a little bit of respect with me when he's like, isn't this Walt's job? What am I doing this for? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, she takes half information and then takes full measure actions on it. And that's very emblematic of Marie to continue to put herself in the middle of situations to kind of make it about her in a way.
Yeah. Yeah. And I remember when Walt Jr. was in the car with Hank there at the Roach Motel or whatever it was called.
Yeah.
Like, Walt Jr.'s just like so confused about what's happening. He's like, I thought we're going for ice cream. He's like,
that is one of my favorite lines. He's like, yeah, we will. Hold on.
And then he makes them a point. And it's just like, Walt Jr.'s like, oh, what was it like? After he does the whole thing with the hooker or whatever, and is just so confused. And Hank's just like, so what do you think of that? He's just like, I think it's kind of cool.
He's like, pretty cool. It's like, no, that's the opposite of what I'm trying to say. Yeah, that it's a very good scene because it kind of like nobody in that situation knows what the fuck is going on. Like everybody is coming from a different angle, and it just confuses everybody. It's super interesting.
I have been in those situations where, like when I was a kid, where someone would like try to have like a adult talk with me, and like the adult had all these assumptions about what was going on, and I'm just like there, like I don't know what this conversation is about. I know what you're trying to imply, but I'm so confused.
Like, what brought this on? And that's exactly where Junior was.
Yeah.
So then we go to Walt. He's in Jesse's bathroom, sitting on our favorite character, jotting down the pros and cons of killing Crazy 8. He has several arguments in support of clemency, while the sole entry in the kill him column is he'll kill your entire family if you let him go. So Walt calls Skylar to claim he's running late at the car wash, but learns she already knows he's been fired from that job, and Skylar says, wherever you are, stay there. And Walt does. He makes a sandwich for Crazy 8, and while he's walking down the stairs, he collapses on the basement floor, and the plate shatters. Walt comes back to consciousness, tells Crazy 8 that he has lung cancer. This is the first person he's ever told he has lung cancer. And he picks up all the plate shards, leaves to make another sandwich, but as he's going, or once he gets back, he tries to get to know Crazy 8. Who tells Walt doing so isn't going to make it any easier to kill him. Walt says, listen, I'm looking for any reason to spare you. They bond over some random local furniture store, television on late night TV. Walt kind of says that, oh, I bought my crib there. And they both are kind of like, yeah, you didn't, but we're going to go with it because this is what we both want, me to have some sort of connection to you so I can be set free. And then Walt tells Crazy 8, I haven't told my family about cancer. Crazy 8 deduces that Walt's cooking meth so he can leave money for his family. And then Crazy 8 offers to write Walt a check and suggests he isn't cut out for murder. So Walt goes to get the bike lock to release Crazy 8.
So I think there's a lot going on in this. Like, Walt's trying to find any reason, but that one reason, like, it somehow balances out all these others.
Yeah.
And it's like I can empathize a lot with Walt in this situation. Like, not that I'd ever want to be in that situation or put myself in that situation, but you can kind of understand where he's coming with this, and it makes perfect sense from his point of view. And he is essentially trying to feel Crazy out because he's trying to find that reason, trying to like get that little thing, because that does happen from time to time. Maybe you wrong somebody, but you know that person's rational and this is like, hey, you know, I don't want any business with you. I'll be out of your hair, just forever. Just leave me alone, and I'll just walk over this way, right? And that does happen occasionally. So Walt's trying to find that and trying to proof it out. And during that conversation with Crazy 8, he's just trying to like get an idea and see if Crazy 8's gonna lie to him, trying to get his character and everything. And like he's putting feelers out there, but also trying to like placate a little bit. I know he's trying to be friendly. It's such a interesting little thing there. And of course, there's the whole thing with the plate, you know, and that'll come definitely a bit later on.
Yeah, I mean that's right now. But I definitely agree. You know, he is trying to literally find any reason. He finds like a half reason, and then Crazy 8's like, well, no, that couldn't even be true. And Walt's like, no, it's definitely true. And like kind of dismisses the facts that are against this connection in favor of like wanting to believe. So he's like forcing a truth that isn't really there. He's lying to himself to make himself feel better. Exactly. Pretty much.
Yeah. It's also super interesting. He was the first person to tell about his cancer, right? Like,
yeah.
Like, what does that even mean? I think my idea is that it's like what I've heard on Reddit at the very least is that when you're on like a crazy trip or whatever, like, okay, back when hitchhikers used to be more of a thing, like the people they'd pick up or the people who were hitchhiking, they'd always hear these crazy stories from their guest because that guest never anticipated to see them again, right? You know, this is like one and done. So people would just admit to crazy things like, I don't know, being raped as a child or murdering somebody or doing who knows what, right? And it's kind of like when you have that complete anonymity and a bit of connection there, you like if you're a dead man walking or metaphorical dead man, that you'll never see this person, you might come clean about your thoughts. You might feel like you can express them.
Yeah. Walt goes up to get the key, and then he suddenly thinks about the broken plate and puts it back together and realizes there's a large knife-shaped shard missing. So he heads back downstairs, and Crazy 8's standing there quietly. Walt tells him to turn around so he can unlock him. And then Walt hesitates for just a second, and Crazy 8's just like, come on, man, you can do it. Unlock it. Then Walt grasps the lock, asks Crazy 8 if he's going to stab him with the shard. And then Crazy 8 like stabs backwards wildly, and Walt pulls hard on the lock and strangles him. Crazy 8's like flailing, and stabs Walt once in the leg, and then dies. And Walt is like crying and apologizing as Crazy 8 dies under his strength.
Yeah, that scene was super hard to watch.
It was really, really hard to watch.
It almost reminds me of this idea that like one death is a tragedy, a million deaths is a statistic. Like this is like that, like full force here, because it just felt so brutal, and part of it's the way they shot it too. But it felt like Walt was literally killing someone there, and
it did.
It really hurt, and you feel him just broken up about it too.
Yeah, I've seen that scene 3, 4, maybe even 5 times now. I still find it very disturbing and hard to watch.
Yeah.
Let alone like the first time watching it, it's brutal. Which great job to the show for doing it in a way that makes it really hard to watch.
I love the scene where Walt is literally putting the pieces together. I mean, it's a great writing ploy to have like the metaphor be incumbent with the plot device too. You know, literally putting the pieces together of the plate and finding out there's a missing shard. And then it's like almost like he's been trying to find any reason not to kill him. And this is one where he just can't ignore this, you know. He can't ignore this one missing piece, and it allies all together.
And I think you and I had a disagreement about this when we originally shot this, because you were under the impression that Walt has always intended to kill Crazy 8 and was refusing to believe it until this moment. And my impression was he was always intending to let him go, and this changed his mind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I thought that was really interesting that we completely disagree about that hyper-specific moment.
Yeah. And I think we both agree, in at least Walt wants to find a reason, but in my opinion, like he knows that piece is there. He knows it's missing somewhere in the back of his mind. It's just a matter of finding the piece.
Yeah.
And all of this has been a lengthy exercise in procrastination. Because I think just as easy as he would have found a reason to kill him, he would have found a reason to keep him there and just kind of not do it, not let him go.
You made the point originally that it goes back to that opening scene where they're talking about that missing 1%, and like that Walt's trying to figure that out, and that's kind of throughout this whole episode. I mean, this is your point.
I like it.
He's like this. It's just the same idea continued forward to what's that missing piece? Why can't I find it? Searching everywhere for it and not being able to find it. It ends up being, and I think we ended up like talking about like, well, is the missing piece that sharp piece of plate, and what does that mean? Is that humanity? Is that anger? Is that violence? Is that what's missing to Walt is violence, and that's what makes him whole? I think it's a super interesting, and I think it could go a lot of different ways as a metaphor.
That's kind of reminded me about our discussion there, because it was super interesting. Because I think the thesis, or that's a little too pretentious. I think the
oh, that stopped you.
Yeah, but I think the idea was that this episode was about more about self-discovery for Walt. You know, finding out who really was, and I think my argument was that the beginning showed the real Walt as he really was. And then this was kind of descent back into more of his original personality. This was him finding that 1% of himself. He knows, like, he's been dealing with the matter. Now he's dealing with the soul.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's all so interesting. I think there's a lot of discussion that can be had here. And it's probably a little bit longer than than one of our episodes would be able to contain. So we can't talk about all of it, but very, very interesting. That, and again, I say it every episode, hats off to the show writers for like making something that's really, really interesting, and that you can, this one tiny little thing connects to everything else and you don't realize it until that moment. And it can just mean so much. And different things to different people. Like we can disagree, and we're cool with disagreeing about, like, we both feel that this came from different angles.
Yeah, yeah. I remember, like, in these early episodes too, I really related a lot to Walt, and it's part of maybe me just projecting myself onto him, because I might be thinking that myself. Again, not that I would want to put myself in that situation, but when you're in that situation and you kind of come at it from his shoes, what would you do? And for me, that's kind of my thing. That's all you can really do, right?
One more really minor thing. I don't want to belabor this too much, but I think this is super interesting. So the plate was there because it was Walt giving, like, showing humanity, showing this niceness, this kindness to, and this humanity to this other person, right? And that ends up being what causes violence towards him and pain for him in the future. Like his acts of like niceness, of being good, became his undoing later on, and what ended up needing to force his hand towards violence. If he had never given him the sandwich, would he have ended up letting him go? That's, I guess, where my question boils down to. Or was that his undoing?
Yeah. I'm trying to think of where to go with that, because I can think of some ideas, but they're pretty abstract.
Yeah. I mean, it's all abstract.
Because what I think about a little bit is, like, theft is only bad if other people, like, theft can only be a moral concept if the idea of property rights are in effect, right?
Yeah.
Like, if nobody respects property rights, then there's no theft. It's just kind of like people just taking whatever. It's not good or bad. It's just kind of the natural state.
Yeah.
Thieves have to rely on people respecting property rights for them to be thieves. Like, that's how they operate. People have these concepts of properties, delineations, and they kind of exploit that. What this means here, I don't know exactly, but it's almost like a crystallization. Like, water can't become ice without, like, a little crystal to form off of. And I feel like this is like the little crystal that's being formed. This is where it's kind of proliferating from. And it's ironically maybe an act of kindness. And I'm not sure if this metaphor is working at all, but that's where I'm kind of thinking.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Walt's denying this 1% is the soul in the beginning. And now he's crying and apologizing as he kills Crazy 8. And, like, I think that's him, like, finding that 1% of, like, there is something more than just the chemical makeup of this person. And he knows he's taking that 1% away. The 99%, the physical body, the chemistry is still going to exist. But that 1% is being taken away. And that's super, super interesting.
Yeah, that's definitely the conundrum people had with the soul back in the day. Because what's the difference between a lifeless body and a moving body? Well, they're both the same thing materially, so there has to be some difference. That difference is the soul.
Yeah.
I think it's very instinctive.
So then Jesse comes home, and Crazy 8's gone from the basement. The bike lock is all that's left behind. So Jesse's like, oh, shit, he did it. The DEA then come across the cook site in the desert where Walt and Jesse had been cooking, and Hank and Gomez quickly put together a theory that a mobile meth lab caught fire and that the occupants sped off after putting out the fire. However, Crazy 8's lowrider car has been left behind, and Hank wonders why until he discovers meth hidden behind the stereo. Then Walt parks his car on the shoulder of a freeway overpass, sits, and resumes his flashback to discussing human chemistry with his lab partner. So they kind of wrap up that whole scene, and then he goes home and finds Skylar crying in the bathroom. He then informs her that there's something he needs to tell her, alluding to his lung cancer diagnosis. End scene. End episode. So I mean, a lot of wrap up there, but it also sets the scene for the next set of dominoes to fall. The DEA is on their trail. The Crazy 8 situation is done, but now that Walt's admitted it to him, the illusion here is that he's going to admit it to his family.
Yeah, yeah. And it'll be interesting to see what he's going to do from that point on. Because honestly, I forget what happens in these episodes later. Not that we're trying to spoil them anyway, but I'm just like, is he going to come clean about this? Or
Yeah.
Yeah. This also definitely had a lot of like heavy moments. I think out of the 3 episodes, I think this is the best that has come out. Not that the first is bad. First is set up. Here we see like a big payoff and a big moment and see what the show is capable of. So super interesting.
I mean, this I think is a massive jump from pilot episode Walt afraid to hold a gun in a controlled environment, an unloaded gun, to murdering somebody. Like that's about as far of a jump as I can imagine, and it to still logically make sense. Like they did a good job progressing it, but also bridging a gap very quickly.
So I think we're getting on to the next episode.
Nice.
We're doing all of them today, by the way. All the recaps. So guess what? We're gonna be tired at the end of this. So if you love this reaction or discussion, wherever it was, you definitely should leave a like, comment, subscribe. I think there's a Patreon link somewhere there, so you can get like stuff ahead of time. That's how I'm intending to get it at the very least. So just got to get that in place. But you guys have a great rest of your day. Thanks. Peace. I react, you react, we all react, because it is a show that you watch with us called Breaking Bad on Pepin Reacts.